I had trusted Ethan Cole for 15 years. Trusted him more than a blood brother. Trusted him enough to give him the key to my house, to entrust him with the evenings when I traveled for work, to entrust him with the peace of mind that my family was protected in my absence. I never imagined that one day, the doorbell camera on my front porch would quietly record the moment that marked the beginning of the collapse of everything I had built. My family lived in North Austin, Texas, in a quiet suburb with neatly trimmed lawns and SUVs parked properly in front of each house. I was a construction project manager, often flying to Houston or Dallas a few days each month. My wife, Olivia, worked part-time as a real estate agent, keeping flexible hours to care for our 8-year-old son, Lucas. Lucas attended a school within the Austin Independent School District, and I was always proud to see him growing up in a stable environment. I once believed I was living the version of the American dream I had pursued since college. Ethan and I met during our freshman year at the University of Texas at Austin. We studied together, worked part-time jobs together, endured difficult years before achieving stable careers. He was the best man at my wedding. He stood beside me when Lucas was born. Olivia used to call him family. And I believed that. That business trip to Houston was only 4 days long. The first night, at 10:47 p.m., my phone vibrated. Motion detected at your front door. I thought it was just a delivery person or a stray cat passing by. But when I opened the Ring app, I saw Ethan. He stood in front of my house, looked around as if checking something, then pulled a key from his pocket and walked inside. I frowned, but still reassured myself. Maybe Olivia had asked him to fix something. The next night, the notification appeared again at the same time. And the night after that, I began scrolling through the stored data from the past 3 months. 27 times he appeared after 9:30 p.m. 27 times he entered my house. Many times not leaving until the following morning. I zoomed in on the footage, checked entry and exit times. There was not a single message from Olivia saying Ethan would come over. No explanation. I sat in my hotel room in Houston, staring at the glow of my phone screen in the dark. My chest tightened, but I did not shout, did not throw my phone, did not call anyone. I simply replayed each video slowly, as if reviewing documents for an important project. I began noting times, dates, frequency. I no longer saw them as my wife and best friend. I saw them as variables in an equation. The climax came with the 23rd video. Lucas was still awake, running to the door when he heard the movement. Ethan bent down to pat his head and walked inside. The door closed behind them. I sat still for a long time after the video ended. I had no more doubts. This was not harmless help. This was organized, repeated betrayal. But instead of calling Olivia or texting Ethan to confront them, I opened my laptop and downloaded every video onto a separate hard drive. I created another backup in the cloud. I changed my account passwords. I began searching for family lawyers in Austin. Each step was slow and deliberate. I knew that if I exploded, I would lose the only advantage I had: control. The next morning, I still video called Lucas as usual. I still asked Olivia about her work. I still talked to Ethan about the weekend game as if nothing had happened. But inside me, something had changed permanently. I was no longer the naive husband who trusted absolutely. I became a man collecting evidence. When the plane landed in Austin 4 days later, I looked at my house through the camera before opening the door. Everything looked the same. Green lawn, Olivia's car in the garage, the soft glow of the living room lights. But I knew that from that moment on, my marriage was no longer built on love. It was built on strategy. And I had decided I would not confront in jealousy. I would win through the law. A weak man would explode with anger the moment he learned he had been betrayed. I had enough reason to do so. But instead of exploding, I chose silence. Not because I did not feel pain, but because I understood that in a legal battle, the one who controls his emotions controls the outcome. I returned to Austin on a scorching afternoon. When I walked into the house, Olivia was standing in the kitchen, smiling as usual. She asked how the business trip was, whether I was tired, whether I had eaten properly. Lucas ran to hug me, the smell of my son's hair familiar as always. Everything looked completely normal. That was what made me feel the coldest. The false normalcy. That evening, I sat in the living room, watching Olivia laugh while talking on the phone. I wondered how many times she had lied to me over the past 3 months. How many times she said she was tired and going to bed early while the camera recorded Ethan entering at 10:47 p.m. Ethan still texted me, as if nothing had happened. "Bro, game this weekend?" I replied as usual. I showed him no change. But inside, I had shifted into a different mode. I began reviewing our family finances. I downloaded 3 months of credit card statements. A charge at a hotel in Dallas appeared twice last month. Olivia had told me she was attending a real estate seminar there. I had never doubted it. Now I checked the dates against my travel schedule. Perfect timing. When I was in Houston, she was in Dallas. I scheduled an appointment with a family lawyer in downtown Austin the next morning. The office was in a glass building overlooking busy streets. I brought the hard drive containing the videos. I did not talk much about emotions. I presented data. The lawyer reviewed each clip, each timestamp. He was not surprised. He said Texas is a community property state, but adultery can affect asset division if there is sufficient evidence. More importantly, custody is determined by the best interest of the child. He looked at me and said, "If you want primary custody, you must prove a more stable environment." I asked him only one question. "Do I have an advantage?" He answered, "If you don't explode, you do." From that moment, I understood I was not allowed to make mistakes. I could not yell at Olivia. I could not punch Ethan. I could not send a single threatening message. Every uncontrolled action could be used against me in court. I hired a private investigator, a former police officer who had worked many years in Travis County. He did not ask many questions. He only requested my travel schedule, my home address, Ethan's license plate number. He said, "If something is happening, we will document it." In the days that followed, I lived in the same house with the woman who had betrayed me. But I behaved as if observing a project under evaluation. I paid attention to the way she texted and quickly deleted messages. I noticed the evenings she went out to meet clients. I recorded times. I kept everything inside, revealing nothing outside. The climax came when the investigator sent me the first photographs. Ethan stood in a parking lot near a restaurant in Austin, waiting. 10 minutes later, Olivia walked out. They got into the same car. I stared at that image for a long time. No longer suspicion, no longer theory. It was truth, captured clearly. That night, Olivia said she had to go to Dallas for 2 days to meet a partner. I simply nodded. I said I would take care of Lucas. When she left, I opened my laptop and continued backing up every new piece of evidence. I felt a dull ache in my chest, but it was no longer explosive anger. It was coldness. Part of me wanted to ask her why. Why Ethan? Why in this very house? But another part understood that the answer would not change the outcome. I did not need an apology. I needed custody. I needed stability for Lucas. A few days later, when Olivia returned from Dallas, I had enough evidence to file for divorce. But I did not do it immediately. My lawyer advised waiting a bit longer to strengthen the case. I agreed. I no longer acted based on emotion. I acted based on strategy. One night, while Olivia slept deeply, I stood by the front door and looked at the Ring camera. 10:47 p.m. No one appeared that night. But I knew that number had become a marker in my mind. That was the moment I lost trust, and also the moment I began reclaiming control. I walked back inside, looked at Lucas sleeping peacefully. I told myself, I will not let my son grow up in an environment filled with lies. I will not let impulsiveness destroy my chances in court. I will wait. And when I move, everything will be based on law, not emotion. Justice does not begin with shouting. It begins with documentation. I had videos from the doorbell camera. I had photographs from the investigator. But I knew that in a divorce case in Texas, suspicion is not enough. I needed a file that could not be broken. My lawyer's office was in downtown Austin, in a glass building reflecting the morning sunlight. I brought the hard drive, bank statements, travel schedules, and a notebook filled with detailed time records. I did not tell my story like a betrayed husband. I presented it as a timeline. Date, hour, event, repetition. The overlap between my business trips and Ethan's appearances. My lawyer, Randall Hayes, was not an emotional man. He read, watched, took notes, then asked brief questions. "Do you have messages confirming she lied?" I handed him my phone. Messages Olivia sent. "I'm home. I'm going to bed early." While GPS data from the investigator's photos showed she was at a restaurant across the city. He nodded. "We need more digital evidence." I began checking Olivia's iCloud. We used to share a family account to share photos of Lucas. I did not initially search for private messages. But when I discovered many conversations had been deleted, I switched into analysis mode. I downloaded an older backup. Some messages had not been completely overwritten. Fragmented conversations appeared, meeting times, affectionate words, sentences like, "I'll come over after Damon leaves." I read without emotion. I had passed the stage of pure pain. Now I was in the stage of proof. The investigator sent more data. Images of Ethan parking in front of my house at 11:12 p.m. The neighbor across the street was willing to sign a statement that he frequently came when I was away. I did not need them to say they suspected anything. I only needed them to confirm frequency. In court, frequency speaks loudly. One afternoon, I sat in my lawyer's office while Mr. Hayes discussed community property. In Texas, marital property is generally divided equally, but if fault, adultery, is proven, the court can adjust division. More importantly, in custody matters, the judge will consider the living environment, stability, and the ability to make decisions in the child's best interest. He looked at me and said, "Don't become the angry man. Be the stable father." I understood that message. If I confronted Olivia with harsh words, if I sent threatening messages to Ethan, everything could be used to prove I lacked control. I gave them no such opportunity. The climax of this chapter came one evening when I replayed the 23rd video. Lucas ran to the door. Ethan bent down, smiling, placing a hand on my son's shoulder. I froze the frame. I zoomed in on my son's face. Lucas did not know what was happening. That was the moment I shifted from betrayed man to protector. The next day, I signed authorization from my lawyer to file for divorce in Travis County. I did not inform Olivia beforehand. I let the law do that. When she received the paperwork, I was at the office. She called me repeatedly. I did not answer. I sent one message. "We will speak through lawyers." That evening, when I returned home, Olivia stood in the living room with panic on her face. She said it was only a mistake, that she loved me, that she did not want the family to break apart. I listened, but did not argue. I said, "Everything will be resolved in court." I saw confusion in her eyes. For the first time since this began, I had complete control. Ethan sent a long message explaining, apologizing, saying he never intended to hurt me. I did not reply. Words had no value now. Only documentation mattered. In the following days, I continued living in the house until the court issued temporary orders. I remained calm in front of Lucas. I still drove him to his school within the Austin Independent School District. I still made breakfast, helped with homework. I began documenting every caregiving activity, pickup times, doctor appointments, parent-teacher meetings. I did not do it to boast. I did it to prove stability. When the petition was officially accepted, I felt not victory, but transition. I had crossed the boundary of marriage and entered a legal war. I was no longer a husband waiting for explanation. I was a petitioner in a fault-based divorce. That night, I stood again in front of the house, looking at the ring camera. The number 10:47 p.m. appeared in my mind. But this time, it was no longer a sign of betrayal. It was evidence, and evidence would shape my son's future. I did not confront in jealousy. I struck at custody. When the divorce petition was filed in Travis County, everything shifted from secret to official. I knew that moment would come, but when it actually happened, the feeling was different. No longer videos watched in the dark or photographs sent through encrypted email. Now it was a court seal, legal documents bearing my name and Olivia's on the same page. The morning Olivia received the paperwork, she called me more than 10 times. I did not answer. I was in my office, door closed, phone face down on the desk. I let my lawyer respond instead. By evening, when I returned home, she stood in the living room, eyes red and voice trembling. She asked why I did this, why I did not talk first. I looked at her and said, I already spoke through evidence. The house in North Austin suddenly felt smaller. Every footstep in the hallway echoed heavily. But in front of Lucas, I remained normal. I still asked him about his math homework, still sat beside him watching cartoons. I did not allow the adults' war to spill into my son's world. The temporary hearing was scheduled faster than I expected. The courtroom at Travis County Family Court was not large, but it was enough to create pressure. I sat beside my lawyer, Randall Hayes. Across from us sat Olivia and her attorney. Ethan was not present that day, but his presence existed in every file on the table. Olivia's lawyer began by minimizing the issue. Adultery does not equal being an unfit mother. I did not react. I knew they would try to separate marriage from parenting. But we did not focus on morality. We focused on stability. My lawyer presented each element one by one. The repeated overnight visits when I traveled for work. The presence of a man who was not the father in the house late at night. Messages confirming lies about location. Mr. Hayes emphasized that I was not trying to prevent Olivia from being a mother. I was seeking a stable and consistent environment for Lucas. The climax of the hearing came when the judge asked a short question. Did the child ever witness this presence? My lawyer played the ring camera footage. Lucas ran to the door. Ethan entered. There was no excessive intimacy shown, but there was repetition and late timing. The room fell silent. Olivia began to cry. She said it was only friendship, that I was exaggerating. But truth lay in data, not explanation. I was asked to speak. I stood up. I did not attack her. I said, I am not asking the court to judge our relationship. I am asking the court to examine the environment my son is living in. I explained my flexible work schedule, how I drove Lucas to his school within the Austin Independent School District when I was home. The doctor appointments I personally attended. I spoke slowly, without raising my voice. The judge wrote more than he spoke. Finally, he issued a temporary order. Primary temporary custody to me. Olivia granted visitation according to schedule and supervised initially for environmental evaluation. I did not show emotion, but inside, I knew I had secured the most important strategic position. After the hearing, Olivia walked out quickly without looking at me. I remained a few seconds longer in the nearly empty courtroom. Randall said quietly, "This is only the beginning." I nodded. I understood that the full trial was still ahead, but the position had shifted. That evening I picked Lucas up from school. I said nothing about court. I only asked what he wanted for dinner. When we returned home, I opened the door with my own key. No longer the feeling of intrusion. No longer uncertainty about who entered at 10:47 p.m. I stood in the living room for a long time after Lucas had fallen asleep. I looked around the house that once symbolized family stability. Now it had become a legal battleground. But I did not feel hatred. I felt clarity. I knew from that moment forward every step I took had to be consistent. No mistakes, no emotional retaliation. Every action would be examined under the best interest of the child. I was no longer fighting for my ego. I was fighting for Lucas's stability. And for the first time since everything began, I realized I was no longer the man reacting to betrayal. I was the one directing the process. The court had recognized that. And this was only the beginning. In the days that followed, my life changed rhythm. I adjusted my work schedule with the construction company to minimize extended business trips. I requested to attend more meetings online instead of flying to Houston or Dallas. I did not do this to create an image. I did it because I understood that in the court's eyes, the physical presence of a father carries more weight than any promise. Lucas began staying with me most of the time. Olivia was granted visitation according to schedule and supervised initially. I did not speak badly about his mother in front of him. I only said that adults were resolving some important matters. But I observed every small expression from Lucas. Repeated questions, confusion about carrying his backpack back and forth between two places. I documented every psychological change, not to use against Olivia, but to demonstrate that I observe and respond in my son's best interest. Meanwhile, my legal team began preparing for trial. Randall Hayes requested my complete financial records for the past 5 years. Income, assets, the mortgage on the house in North Austin, retirement accounts. Because Texas is a community property state, everything after marriage would almost be divided equally, unless fault influenced adjustment. Adultery does not automatically change everything, but it can adjust percentages if financial harm or systematic deception is proven. I began analyzing Olivia's spending more closely. The 2 hotel charges in Dallas were not the only ones. There were additional smaller payments, expensive dinners, event tickets, expenses unrelated to work that she had explained as client entertainment. I did not speculate. I marked patterns. My lawyer said, "We don't need to smear. We need a pattern." The climax of this chapter came when we received Olivia's official response. She requested joint managing conservatorship, shared legal custody, and nearly equal parenting time. Her argument emphasized that I frequently traveled for work and that my environment lacked stable presence. I read the response without visible emotion, but I understood their strategy. Reverse the narrative. Randall looked at me and said, "From now on, every trip you take must have a clear backup care plan, and ideally, limit them." I called my supervisor that same afternoon. I explained the situation without sharing personal details. I requested a role adjustment for the next 6 months. Fortunately, my work record was strong enough that the company agreed. I also began attending family counseling sessions as recommended by my lawyer, not because I had lost control, but because proactively supporting my son's mental well-being demonstrates that I prioritize Lucas's best interest. I took Lucas to the first session, sitting outside the waiting room, feeling as if I was attending the most important meeting of my life. One evening, while preparing documents for my lawyer, Olivia texted asking to talk privately, without attorneys. She said we could resolve this civilly if I agreed to nearly 50-50 custody. I read the message for a long time. Part of me wanted to end everything quickly, reduce pressure on Lucas. But I remembered Randall's words. Settlement should happen only when you have clear advantage. I replied briefly, "All communication through lawyers." That coldness did not come from hatred. It came from calculation. I was no longer the husband trying to salvage. I was the father evaluating risk. At the end of that month, we attended a formal deposition. Olivia was questioned under oath. She admitted the relationship with Ethan was inappropriate, but minimized its extent. My lawyer did not focus on intimate details. He focused on timing, on Lucas being present in the house, on overlap with my travel schedule. Each question built a pattern of repeated behavior. I sat there listening to the woman who once shared my bed answer questions about another man entering our home. I did not feel explosive anger as I once imagined. I felt distance, as if I were hearing a story about someone else. When the deposition ended, Randall whispered, "They weakened." I knew he was not talking about emotion. He was talking about legal position. That evening, I brought Lucas home after counseling. My son asked, "Dad, is everything okay?" I looked at him and said, "I'm doing everything to make sure you're always okay." I did not promise marriage. I promised stability. Before going to sleep, I looked at the Ring camera again. No more 10:47 p.m. notifications. But now, I did not see it as a device that detected betrayal. I saw it as a symbol of my transformation. I had moved from being hurt to preparing for the final battle. The official trial was approaching, and I knew if I continued holding this strategy, the remaining question would not be who was right or wrong in marriage, but who provided the more stable environment for Lucas. Legal war is not loud like arguments. It takes place in closed meeting rooms, in long emails, in mediation sessions where every word carries weight. As trial approached, the court required us to attend mandatory mediation before setting the official trial date. It was the last opportunity for both sides to reach an agreement without entering a prolonged court battle. The mediation took place in an office in downtown Austin. There was no judge's bench, no courtroom audience. Only two separate conference rooms, a neutral mediator, and thick case files on the table. I sat beside Randall Hayes, my hand resting on the marked documents. In the other room were Olivia and her attorney. The mediator moved back and forth between rooms, delivering each side's proposals. Olivia's first proposal maintained her request for joint managing conservatorship and nearly 50-50 parenting time, along with minor asset adjustments to maintain peace. I listened without showing reaction. Randall asked me only one question. "Do you want to counter?" I said, "Maintain primary custody." For me, the issue was no longer assets. I was willing to divide most property if it ensured Lucas had a stable environment. But I would not accept a constantly shifting custody schedule, especially when Olivia herself had created the initial instability. The climax of the mediation occurred when Ethan appeared as a potential witness during an additional deposition that same day. He did not sit in the same room, but I saw him in the hallway when I stepped out for water. For the first time in months, we faced each other directly. He looked down, avoiding my eyes. I said nothing. It was unnecessary. During the deposition, Ethan testified under oath and attempted to minimize the relationship. He said the feelings developed after the marriage had problems. Randall did not argue about emotions. He asked about timing, asked about the key to my house, asked about overnight visits when Lucas was present, asked whether Ethan knew I had not been informed. Each question drilled small holes into his defensive structure. Ethan hesitated when asked whether he had considered the psychological impact on a child when entering his best friend's home late at night. He gave evasive answers, but in the record, those evasions became official. As mediation continued, the mediator returned with a new proposal. Olivia was willing to accept me as primary parent if granted immediate, unsupervised visitation. I thought for a long time. I did not want Lucas cut off from his mother. But I also did not want to accelerate change before the environmental evaluation was complete. Randall whispered, "You can agree to a phased plan." I nodded. We proposed a 3-stage plan. Continue supervision for a short period, reassess, then gradually expand. It was not punishment. It was structure. Mediation ended without full agreement. Some property issues were resolved, but custody remained contested. That meant the official trial would proceed. That evening, I sat in the living room while Lucas did homework at the dining table. I thought about sitting across from my 15-year best friend under oath. No shouting, no punches, only questions and recorded answers. I wondered whether Ethan ever understood that his betrayal did not only destroy my marriage, but also placed him permanently in a legal record. But that thought quickly passed. I no longer sought remorse. I sought stability. A few days later, the court set the trial date. Everything became concrete. Preparation time shortened. Randall asked me to prepare my personal testimony for trial. Concise, not overly emotional, focused on the best interest of the child. I practiced answering directly, keeping my tone steady, avoiding speculation. One evening, as I reviewed documents, Lucas sat beside me and asked, "Dad, are you mad?" I looked at my son for a long moment. I said, "I'm not mad. I'm focused." And that was the truth. I was no longer in the stage of personal hurt. I was in the final strategic stage before entering the courtroom. Mediation showed me one clear fact. The other side began to concede as legal pressure increased. That did not make me satisfied. It only reinforced that I had chosen the correct path. The path not based on emotion. The night before the final documents were submitted for trial, I looked at the ring camera again. 10:47 p.m. No one appeared anymore. But now, that number was no longer a painful memory. It was the starting point of this entire process. I turned off the living room lights, locked the door, and went to bed with one clear thought. I cannot control the past, but I can control how my son's future is decided. Justice does not come through emotion. It comes through a verdict read aloud. On the day of the official trial at Travis County Family Court, I woke up earlier than usual. I wore a dark gray suit and a simple tie. Not to impress, but to show seriousness. I looked at Lucas before leaving the house. My son did not know that day was special, and I wanted to keep it that way. The courtroom was more crowded than the previous hearings. Court staff, attorneys, a few observers. I sat beside Randall Hayes. Across from us were Olivia and her lawyer. Ethan was also present under witness subpoena. No one spoke to anyone. The trial began with opening statements from both attorneys. Olivia's lawyer attempted to build the image of her as a devoted mother who made a marital mistake, but one unrelated to parenting ability. They emphasized that I had traveled frequently for work, that my environment depended on my schedule. They tried to create the impression that I was using the affair as a tool for revenge. I listened without reacting. Randall had prepared for this. When it was our turn, he did not attack with strong language. He presented structure, time, data, frequency, living environment. He emphasized the stability I had established since the temporary order. School routine, counseling, my consistent presence at home. My first witness was the private investigator. He confirmed the photographs, timestamps, and data collection process. Then the neighbor confirmed Ethan's frequent visits when I was away. No one judged. They only confirmed observed facts. The climax of the trial came when Ethan was called to testify. He swore under oath and tried to remain calm. Olivia's lawyer questioned him first, focusing on how the relationship did not affect Lucas. Then Randall stood. He asked about the key to my house. Ethan admitted I had given him the key out of trust. He asked about the times he came over. After 10 p.m., multiple overnight visits. He asked whether I had been informed. Ethan answered no. He asked whether Lucas was home during those times. Ethan said yes. No drama, no argument, only sworn answers. After Ethan, it was my turn. I stepped to the witness stand and took the oath. I felt Olivia's eyes on me, but I did not look back. Randall began with basic questions about my job, income, and current schedule. He asked about how I adjusted work to limit travel. I answered clearly, without excess. Then he asked the key question. Why are you requesting primary custody? I looked directly at the judge and said, because my son needs an environment that does not change depending on who has the key to the house. I did not add more. I did not recount betrayal details. I spoke about consistency, about stable schooling in the Austin Independent School District, about participating in counseling with my son. The opposing lawyer tried to provoke me. They asked whether I was angry, whether I had considered forgiveness, whether I was punishing Olivia. I answered that personal emotion was not the basis of this request. I said, I am not asking the court to judge the marriage. I am asking the court to examine the environment for my son. When arguments concluded, the room became quiet. The judge wrote notes for several minutes. He said he would review the entire record and issue a decision in 2 weeks. No immediate ruling. No cinematic climax. Only waiting. I left the courtroom without looking at Ethan. I did not look at Olivia either. In the hallway, Randall said, "You maintain stability." I nodded. I did not know what the result would be, but I knew I had not destroyed my position through emotion. The 2-week wait was the longest period since this began. I continued taking Lucas to school, continued working, continued counseling sessions. I did not change routine. I understood that regardless of the verdict, I still had to be the stable anchor for my son. One evening before the decision day, I stood by the front door, looking at the Ring camera out of habit. 10:47 p.m. No movement. I remembered the first night I saw Ethan appear. If that night I had exploded and rushed home, I might have destroyed all my advantage. Now everything was in the court's hands. I had done my part. I had presented truth without shouting. And I understood, whatever the result, I had not allowed betrayal to turn me into a man without control. The verdict did not arrive with a dramatic gavel strike like in movies. It came in an even, calm voice. but enough to change the entire trajectory of a family. That morning, I walked into Travis County Family Court without the anxiety I once imagined. I had done everything I could. The rest no longer belonged to my emotions. Olivia sat on the opposite side, hands tightly clasped together. Ethan did not appear. Perhaps he understood his role had ended long ago. Randall sat beside me, flipping through the file one last time as a professional habit rather than necessity. I looked straight ahead, seeking no one's eyes. The judge entered. Everyone stood. The air in the courtroom felt thick, as if every breath could be heard. He began reading the summary of the case. Procedural history, evidence presented, legal factors related to the best interest of the child. I listened to every word without missing any. He mentioned the repetition of a man who was not the father appearing in the home late at night. He mentioned how I adjusted my work to increase presence at home. He mentioned my proactive involvement in counseling for Lucas. He did not condemn anyone. He simply recorded data. The climax came when he read the decision. Primary physical custody awarded to me, Damon Wolfe. Olivia granted visitation under the standard possession order, with gradual expansion based on environmental evaluation and cooperation. Property division adjusted considering fault, but still within Texas community property framework. I did not feel a wave of victory rush through me. I simply exhaled, a long breath I had held for months. I heard Olivia begin to cry on the other side, but I did not turn to look. I did not want to turn that moment into a final confrontation. When the judge concluded, everyone stood. Randall shook my hand and said quietly, "You held the strategy." I nodded. No loud congratulations, no sense of triumph, only confirmation that emotional control had not been wasted. Outside the courthouse, Austin's sunlight fell across the pavement. I stood alone for a few minutes before getting into my car. I thought about 15 years of friendship, about the marriage that had ended, about nights sitting in a hotel room staring at a glowing phone screen in the dark. If I had chosen a different path, shouting, violence, direct confrontation, today might have been different. That afternoon, I picked Lucas up from school as usual. My son ran out with his backpack, asking what we would eat tonight. I smiled and said we would have pizza. I did not speak about the verdict. I did not speak about the court. I simply kept life normal. That night, after Lucas was asleep, I stood in front of the house once more. The Ring camera remained quietly recording. 10:47 p.m. No motion notification. That number once marked betrayal. Now it was just an hour in the day. I thought about everything that had happened. I did not win because I was smarter. I won because I did not lose control. I did not use betrayal as a reason to destroy. I used it as motivation to build a solid case. Life after divorce is not a perfect ending. There will be difficult days, exchanges through lawyers, times when Lucas asks why the family is no longer the same. But one thing I know for certain, my son's environment is now based on stability rather than secrecy. I locked the door, turned off the living room lights, and walked upstairs. In the mirror, I saw a different version of myself. No longer the naive husband who trusted blindly, nor the betrayed man seeking revenge. I was the father who chose strategy over impulse. Before sleeping, I looked at Lucas one more time. I understood that this entire battle was never truly about Olivia or Ethan. It revolved around one single question. Who would provide the most stability for an 8-year-old child? And today, that answer had been read aloud in the courtroom.